You pull into a gas station somewhere in Alberta. The diesel pump clicks off. $85. And you turn your head to see what just parked next to you. It's not a Sprinter, not a Winnebago, not even an Earth Roamer. It's taller, wider, cleaner. The body panels look like they were carved from a single block of aerospace-grade aluminum. There's Chinese script on the back. The guy filling it doesn't even look at you. He just taps his phone, the side door hisses open like a spaceship airlock, and you catch a glimpse inside. Marble countertop, mood lighting, a bed that looks like it came from a Scandinavian design catalog. He climbs in, door shuts, drives off, and you're standing there holding a diesel nozzle, wondering what the hell you just witnessed. That was a Maxxis V90 diesel motorhome, and you can't have one. Not legally. Not unless you move north. Because while Canadians are quietly registering Chinese motorhomes that make American RVs look like overpriced tin cans, we're stuck behind a regulatory wall that was built to protect us, but is really just keeping us in the dark ages. The EPA won't let them in. NHTSA says no. DOT shakes its head. And so the most advanced, most affordable, and most capable expedition motorhomes on the planet are slipping across the Canadian border while we watch from behind a chain-link fence. This isn't about politics. This is about engineering. And what China is building right now in the motorhome space is making our RV industry look slow, bloated, and criminally expensive. So let's talk about the 5 Chinese motorhomes that Canadians can legally get their hands on while Americans are left dreaming. And trust me, this is going to hurt. The first one is the Jinlv Series 7. Jinlv, sometimes rendered as Golden Travel, is a Chinese luxury motorhome manufacturer that most North Americans have genuinely never heard of. And that gap in your knowledge is not your fault. They don't advertise here. They don't show up at the RV show in Tampa. They build for a Chinese luxury market that has exploded over the last decade, which means their engineering standards are not good enough for the masses. They're competing for customers who have options. That changes what the product becomes. The Series 7 sits on a Foton Alman heavy-duty chassis, powered by a Cummins ISB diesel. Yes, that Cummins, the American engine company that supplies half the serious commercial vehicles in the world. The pairing is significant because it means the powertrain isn't a mystery. It's proven, it's serviceable, parts exist. When you drive something this size down a mountain pass, you want to know that the engine underneath you has a lineage, a track record, a global service network. The Cummins provides that. What Jinlv builds around it is where things get cinematic. The exterior presence is somewhere between a private jet and a bunker. Wide body coach profile, panoramic glass that wraps higher than it has any right to. Full-length awning systems on both sides that deploy with the kind of quiet mechanical confidence that makes you want to clap. Inside, the level of finish is not what you associate with mass-produced RVs. It's what you associate with custom builds, real wood panels, induction cooking, climate zones front and rear, a master bedroom in the rear that genuinely functions as a bedroom, not a mattress crammed into a cubby, but a room with proper ceiling height and lighting that you'd be comfortable describing as a hotel suite. The comparison vehicle Americans keep reaching for is the Newmar Mountain Aire or the Tiffin Allegro bus. Both are exceptional rigs. Both are also $150,000 heavier on the price tag. Canadian private importers have been bringing Jinlv units in through Chinese commercial vehicle channels. You cannot do that in the States. The EPA certification pathway for a vehicle like this, built by a manufacturer with no existing North American compliance infrastructure, is not a realistic option for a private buyer. The door is effectively closed. Now let's go in a completely different direction, because the second vehicle is not a coach. It's a weapon. The Dongfeng Hercules Overlander, built on the Dongfeng Kinland platform, is what happens when an engineering team decides that a motorhome should also be capable of driving through a river, not across a bridge, over a river, through the river. The Kinland chassis is a heavy-duty trucking platform with serious off-road tuning applied to a conversion that sits high, runs wide, and looks like it was styled by someone who grew up watching Mad Max and decided the vehicles in that film weren't practical enough. The ground clearance on properly configured builds approaches what you'd find on dedicated expedition trucks. The approach and departure angles mean you're not hunting for a paved campsite. You're choosing terrain the way you choose music, based entirely on what you're in the mood for. Powertrain options on Jinlv-based builds have included Weichai and Cummins diesel configurations, and the torque profile at low RPM, which is what actually matters when you're crawling through rough terrain at walking pace, is the kind of thing that makes American off-road RV buyers put their hands on the hood and go quiet. The interior on Expedition spec builds is stripped of unnecessary softness. Think military efficiency with designer touches. Every surface is either functional or beautiful. Nothing is wasted. The storage systems are engineered with the obsessive logic of a sailboat, where every cubic inch has a purpose, and the weight distribution has actually been considered. Compare this to the Earthroamer XVLTS, which is genuinely an incredible American machine and costs somewhere around $500,000, and the Jinlv-based build is doing roughly 90% of the mission for roughly 20% of the price. North of the border, people are already importing these through specialty Chinese vehicle channels. In the United States, between NHTSA, structural compliance requirements, DOT certification, and EPA emissions standards that apply specifically to imported vehicles from manufacturers without pre-existing compliance packages, you're looking at a bureaucratic wall that isn't coming down anytime soon. Third on the list is the one that physically hurts the most to talk about, because it's electric and because it points directly at where all of this is heading. Several Chinese coach builders, including operations working closely with BYD's commercial chassis division, have been producing full electric motorhomes on BYD's T-Series and commercial EV platforms. BYD, as a company, needs no introduction at this point. They build more electric vehicles than anyone on Earth. Their battery technology is not experimental, and it is production grade, it is field proven, it is the same fundamental architecture keeping electric buses running in cities across Europe and increasingly across Canada. When you take that platform and wrap a motorhome around it, you get something the American RV market has been promising for years without actually delivering. The range on current production builds using BYD commercial EV platforms varies based on configuration, but you're looking at real-world highway range numbers that make the camping use case genuinely viable. Not theoretical, not if you drive very slowly, but actually viable for the kind of travel distances that characterize Canadian and American road trips. The charging infrastructure story is more complex, and nobody credible is pretending that charging a vehicle this size is the same as plugging in a Tesla. But the trajectory is obvious. The infrastructure is coming. The question is whether you want to be positioned for that future or still paying premium prices for diesel rigs that are engineering themselves toward obsolescence. Solar integration on these builds is not an afterthought. The roof real estate is treated as a power generation system. The battery capacity means you're running climate control, cooking, lighting, and entertainment off stored energy with no generator noise, no diesel smell, no mechanical anxiety at 2 in the morning when you're parked in the middle of nowhere. The Thor Sanctuary and the Winnebago ERV get mentioned whenever this conversation happens in the United States, and both are legitimate products with serious engineering behind them. But they're also premium priced, limited in availability, and working off platforms that were originally designed for internal combustion adaptation. The Chinese builds are starting from electric native architecture. That's not a small thing. Canadian buyers can legally bring these in under private import frameworks. The U.S. market, at this moment, has no equivalent pathway for most of these specific manufacturers. Number 4 is going to sound almost too practical to be interesting until you understand what it actually is. The Foton View traveler-based camper van conversions represent the most accessible entry point into this entire world, and they're being criminally overlooked. The Foton View is a medium-duty van platform that has been in production long enough to have a real service history, real parts availability, and real-world validation from commercial fleets across Asia, Europe, and increasingly Latin America. It sits in roughly the same market position as the Mercedes Sprinter or the Ford Transit. High roof, medium wheelbase, mechanically understood. but with a price structure that reflects a different manufacturing economy. Chinese conversion shops have been building out these vans with a level of interior refinement that makes the American Class B van life market look like it's still figuring out where to put the sink. The conversions hitting the market now feature things like full-height standing room, convertible sleeping and living configurations that don't require you to move 6 things before you can lie down, lithium battery banks integrated into the floor structure rather than bolted in as an afterthought, and kitchen setups that include actual refrigeration, not a cooler, actual 12-volt compressor refrigerators running off the house battery system with enough capacity to store food for a week. The Winnebago Revel lives in this space on the American side. It's a beautiful product. It's also somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 US for a base configuration. The Foton-based builds from serious Chinese converters are coming in at a fraction of that cost and delivering comparable or, in some cases, superior interior quality per square foot. Private importers north of the border are accessing these. The U.S. market is not, because the Foton View as a platform has not gone through the full FMVSS and EPA compliance process required to sell commercially in the United States, and the investment required to push that through for a vehicle at this price point doesn't make economic sense for importers working with current regulatory frameworks. The fifth one is the most ambitious and, honestly, the most absurd in the best way. There is a category of Chinese full-body coach motorhome that sits above everything else on this list. Builders like Kawai, operating in the Chinese high-end coach conversion space, have been producing vehicles that are essentially rolling penthouses on commercial bus platforms. We are talking about a 7 to 8 meter long full coach body on a Yutong or independent bus platform with slide-out room extensions that, when deployed, turn the interior footprint into something you'd associate with a high-end hotel suite rather than any vehicle ever made. Ceiling heights that allow a 6-foot adult to walk through the entire length without instinctively bracing for impact. Bathroom configurations that include full wet rooms, not RV bathrooms, actual showers you'd use in a real house, with stone or stone effect surfaces, full-size fixtures, and lighting that was clearly designed by someone who understood that the difference between a bathroom that feels luxurious and one that doesn't is almost entirely about light, temperature, and fixture placement. The entertainment systems in these builds are not the kind of television mounted to a plywood backing that you find in a typical North American coach. They're integrated, multi-zone audio, motorized privacy systems, climate control that treats each section of the vehicle as a separate thermal zone because the engineers understood that you might want the bedroom cooler than the living space while you're cooking. The driving dynamics on a well-tuned coach platform are not the terrifying white-knuckle experience you might associate with something this size. The wheelbase provides natural stability. Modern air suspension systems on these platforms smooth out imperfections in a way that makes the interior experience genuinely comfortable at highway speed. The American competitive set, Prevost coaches, the top Newmar configurations, Marathon coach conversions represents the pinnacle of what North America builds in this category. It also represents price tags that begin at several $100,000 and go north from there without apology. Canadian buyers with patience and the right importer relationships can bring these in. Getting one registered and road legal in the United States is not a realistic private buyer pathway in the current regulatory environment. Here's what this all adds up to, and I want you to sit with this for a second, because it matters beyond just shopping for motorhomes. The American RV industry has enjoyed a protected domestic market for a long time, not protected through explicit policy language necessarily, but protected through the practical effect of compliance costs that make foreign entry difficult for manufacturers who don't have the scale to absorb the investment. That protection has allowed pricing to remain elevated and innovation to move slower than it otherwise would. The Winnebago Revel is a good product. The Earth Roamer is a great product. The Newmar at the top end builds something genuinely impressive. But when you look at what Chinese manufacturers are producing right now, the engineering ambition, the material quality, the feature density, the price positioning, and then you look at the border and understand that Canadians can access most of it and Americans can't, the word that comes to mind isn't complicated. It's just behind. The vehicles on this list aren't perfect. Chinese after-sales support infrastructure in North America is limited. Parts sourcing requires planning. There are real and valid operational considerations for anyone making this decision. None of that changes the fundamental reality that there are machines being built on the other side of the Pacific that represent a genuinely different level of capability and value, that our neighbors to the north can register and drive and live in, and that we are watching from a distance through a regulatory window that isn't opening anytime soon. That feeling you have right now? That's not jealousy exactly. It's something more specific. It's the feeling of watching a category shift happen in real time and understanding that by the time it reaches you, the people who got there first will have had years of head start. Canada got there first. The machines are real. The access is real. And we're still here writing scripts about it. Game's already changed. We just haven't been told yet.